All right, everyone, the DOJ has now determined that Yale indeed does discriminate on a racial basis in its admissions policies. Now, this is like, it's obvious. Affirmative action is racism, essentially. Affirmative action as well is sexism and heterophobia in some cases. It is. I use the example of this. Let's say, because it deals with finite resources. If you have a finite number of slots available in a college, a university, or a finite anything, any differential involves demotion. And I'll tell you what the example is that I use. Let's say that Sticks, Hex, and Hammer's bread store opens up. All we sell is 2 kinds of bread. That's all it's a very small store, as you can tell. It belongs in Rutland. We sell 2 loaves of bread. They're basically the same. The only difference is one is called bread A, the other one's bread B. Otherwise, they're basically the same. Maybe they're a different color, I suppose. Let's say that I start promoting bread A. Have I demoted bread B by default? Yes. There are a finite number of loaves of bread that I'm going to sell each day. Probably none at Sticks, Hex, and Hammer's bread store. It's shitty bread. It's made of Andy 6 logs. In 2 different flavors, corn and extra steamy. I'm not demoting bread B directly. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm not saying it's inferior in quality. I'm not jacking the price up. They're the same. All I'm doing is promoting bread A. But there are only a certain number of people that are going to buy a certain number of loaves of bread. If I then tilt things in favor of bread A, I have, because of the finite nature of the resources available to buy bread among the population, I have necessarily declined the sales of bread B. Unless people ignore me. Maybe people think that I'm a shitty person, so they buy bread B because I'm promoting bread A. There could be a little bit of a reverse reaction, but the DOJ is basically saying the fact that they inevitably they tilt things in favor of admitting people who are non-white and non-Asian quite heavily in Yale's case in order to diversify the pool of applicants. Now, what I've suggested is we should have blind enrollment. When you attempt to get into a college or a university, they have a certain number of slots. Again, a finite number of people can go to that college physically to study. Now, in the digital era, that's not necessarily going to be the case forever. I get they'll do affirmative action for that too, and it'll be half off for people with native ancestry or something like that, which is a bunch of dumb fuckery and shit. Anyway, what you should do is have a blind enrollment system. When you submit things, it's just your academic and extracurricular credentials. It shouldn't even say the high school you're from because they might have demographic differences. Like, I went to Martin Luther King High School. Okay, well, this applicant might fit in with a certain race of people. I went to Robert E. Lee High School. Okay, that's probably the demographics on average are going to be different. I went to the Chinese exchange sub-college. What you need to do is have a situation where you don't know anything about them personally. Because then what will happen is they will be forced to be entirely meritocratic. They'll look at GPA, SAT scores, the entrance essay, and all of those different things. And they will, from that, construct a pool of people that they want to shortlist. And those people will get a shortlist. Essentially, you probably admitted here. Then they use a random number generator to cull it down to the number of qualified applicants for the number of slots they have. It would be an entirely, completely fair and totally meritocratic process in which there could be no form of discrimination. Why don't they do this then? I thought that all people were fundamentally equal. And equal protection, of course, is enshrined under law. I would think that nothing better than in the educational system where people should be chosen meritocratically. You don't want nuclear physicists who are subpar in their capabilities with regards to math. We don't need that. The idea that you would choose a less qualified individual potentially based on the color of their skin absolutely is racist. It's explicitly bigoted. Now, Yale is doubling down saying, well, we're proud of our admissions process and criteria. They're actually proud of the fact that they discriminate against white and Asian American individuals in favor of other groups, again, because they want to look diverse and stuff. And really, it's just a grift for money. It all boils down to the same fucking goddamn thing. Because if they admit people on a meritocratic basis and they end up 50% people of Chinese and Japanese origin and they lack diversity and stuff, some of their sponsorships will dry up. And that would be, it shows the bigotry of corporate America as well. And of course, multinational corporations with deep foreign ties and deep foreign pockets. It shows their bigotry and their, I would say, corruption as well. They're not saying, oh, there's anything wrong with white or Asian applicants. They're not demoting them explicitly. But if you have 1,000 seats available and you tilt things heavily in favor of those of other groups in order to artificially load seats with people who are like black, Native American, whatever. You inevitably are demoting people who are white or Asian, assuming that you think going to Yale is a good thing. Now, of course, it can be quite lucrative. You're still spending through the nose for no reason for a piece of fucking goddamn paper. But the piece of fucking goddamn paper says Yale on it, and so you're automatically assumed to be great. Oh, wow, you went to Yale. It's basically the equivalent of a vanity plate on your car. But it does impress some people. Yeah, it'll help your job prospects. Only not if you're white or Asian, according to the DOJ's own findings. So now the DOJ is saying that unless they change their criteria up for the next season, they're going to get sued. Good. I think, aren't they doing that to Harvard as well? Because Harvard discriminates heavily, especially against Asians. Like it tilts it massively against them. I noticed there is one potentially advantaged group in the economic sense, and in many cases the academic sense, that is not part of that, which is people who are Jewish. I wonder why they wouldn't want to discriminate against that particular group. Could it be that they would get completely cocksmacked and lose every sponsor? And they should. There shouldn't be any bigotry in hiring or in education. Nobody should be discriminated against. People should be treated equally. And these groups, they get grants from the government. I know a lot of it's, in the case of Ivy League schools, a lot of it is private donations, but there's a public contribution to it. And taxpayers, they still fund the roads that go to the college, don't they? They still help to fund the energy sector that keeps their lights on. I would think that the public has a little bit of a right to weigh in on such things. Now, little Jimmy, he was going to go to Yale, and he's got 4.5 GPA and National Honor Society, aced the SAT and the ACT. He's an honor scout, and he saved little old ladies from a burning fire, and he helps to nurse orphans on the weekends. He's just an upstanding dude, does everything right. But he's not allowed to go to Harvard or Yale because of the color of his skin, because somebody else got that slot instead because of the color of theirs. Isn't that like explicitly the definition of bigotry and discrimination in that case? As far as basically when college should be seen as almost like hiring someone anyway and getting someone on board. There's basically an academic compact, a contract of sorts that you're following. You're kind of like an employee who simply is not being paid and has to do all sorts of pro bono shit. A lot of you do like internships and stuff. Yeah, I think it's absolutely unacceptable. Yale should be sued. It should have been sued long ago, but the thing is, until the Trump admin, nobody had the balls. They didn't want to raise the issue because they didn't want to look like they were being politically incorrect by claiming that affirmative action had problems, by claiming that it's explicitly bigotry, which everyone who's reasonable knows it is. But I'll tell you, a lot of people, even people that benefit by affirmative action, a lot of them know it's bullshit, but they're benefiting by it, so they shut up about it. And a lot of people, like, let's say that you had some sort of discriminatory practice that helped white people. A lot of white people wouldn't call it out, now would they? Because they're benefiting by it. Self-interest, that's all it's about. That's about all. Peace out.